Hi guys, in this session I am going to teach you all the things you need to know about object-oriented programming in a Python. If you do not have any previous knowledge about object-oriented programming, follow me here. I will start with the step-by-step and talk about every concept in detail that will improve your knowledge and help you a lot. First, I will discuss what are the topics I will cover under this session. So I will talk about the session guideline. So in this session, I will cover about introduction of object-oriented programming, classes and object, how we are going to create a class and how we are going to access the method of a class and the data members by using object. Then we'll talk about inheritance, encapsulation and a polymorphism in an object-oriented programming. These are the building block of object-oriented programming and also asked in many interviews. So this training video will help you a lot and enrich your knowledge. And now before we start, quick note, if you find this tutorial helpful, then hit the like button and subscribe the channel. It will help me to keep going. Now first start with the introduction of object-oriented programming in Python. Python support different programming approaches. One of the approach to solve programming problem by creating an object. Suppose object could represent the person with the property like name, age and address and the behavior like talking, walking and running. An object has the features that is the attribute and behavior. Using that feature, we can read the data of a class by using the object. Now we'll focus on the class. Now start the discussion of a class. What is a class and why we need a class? The class is logical grouping or it is a template for creating an object. And why we require a class? To access the function and data member that we use in a class. In a Python, different data structure are used to store the data like tuple, list, dictionary, set. And suppose I want to store the data of a student, I will create a list. So for example, I just create a list which hold the student data of a different kind. Say, let's say I want to store the student name, student mobile number, student age, student college name, and the department of the student, or we can say branch of the students. So if I want to store this information, I just create a simple list and that list will hold all the information about the student. Now if I want to store the data of all the students who are studying in a particular department, so what I need to do, I have to create a multiple list like student 1, student 2, student 3, student 4 till the student n. But the list is not a good option to store the data likewise. I have to create a multiple list to store that information. So we need to use a class which contain different data member and data function which will be stored all the record of the students by using class. So now how to create a class? Class is a reserved keyword. By using that we can create a class and name of the class. Let's say I want to create a class student, and within that class we can write the different method. Initially I will not write anything inside a class. I just use a pass keyword which will do nothing. So this is my class. To access all the member of a class, we require instance of a class. So I'll just create instance S1 of the class student, and by using name of the class, I can create an instance. I just comment to this line which is not required for us, and I just save and compile the code. I'll get nothing in the outcome, but the code is working successfully without any kind of error. So this is my class. Now the class is empty and we can access all the member afterwards. And this is the instance of the class. Instance of the class. Through that, we can access all the data member and data function of the class. Now we will extend, we will write a certain method inside a class so that we can access that member through the class object. So now I'll create one function within the class. So just I remove this pass and I'll write a function ref underscore underscore init. It is a constructor. Using that constructor, I'll initialize the data member. So self and the member which I want to access through the object. So I want to access name of the student, then city of the student, age of the student, college name, and a department, DEPT. So this is the information that I want to be initialized when we create a class object. So this is my constructor which will construct the value to these members. So what I need to do, I need to write a self dot the attribute name, that is name, is equal to name. Second attribute self dot ct of the student is equal to ct. Third attribute, self dot age is equal to age of the student. Next attribute, self dot college name is equal to college name, and self dot department is equal to department. So these are the variable that will initialize when we create a class object automatically. So by using this constructor, we can, now this is a constructor which will construct the value for all these variables through the object. So you can find over here there is an error because now my class contains these attributes and we need to pass this attribute when we create the class object. So I just save the code and I compile it. I'll get an error. What sort of error? There is an error. So argument name, city, age, college name not is in the constructor call. So we need to pass that value. So what I need to do? I need to pass the value when I create the class object. So the name of the students I need to pass. So let's say name of the student is, let's say Gokul. Let's say city is equal to Pune. Let's say age is equal to 34. Sorry, how much is that? 34. And let's say college name is, let's say College of Engineering. And let's say department, it is, let's say computer. So now all the members has been initialized correctly through the object. So now I save the code and I compile it. I'll get the output will be stored in S1, but I not write any print statement so that it won't print on anything. So just now I write a print and S1 dot name. I just wanted to print the name of the student, as well as I want to print age of the students. So S1 dot age, so it will print name and age of the student. So I just save the code and I compile it. I'll get the output. Name of the student is Gokul and age is 34. So this data is initialized and we can access through the instance of the class. So these are the instance member of the class. So this instance is responsible to store the value inside that variable. Suppose if I print class name, let's say student dot name, what will be the output? Just I save the code and I'll execute it. I'll get an error. Why it is an error? Because this student is a class and this name is the attribute that is called as instance attribute of the class. This is the instance attribute of the class. This is not the class attribute. That's why we cannot access through the class name. So this is the instance attribute. Instance attribute, so that we cannot access through the class name. So we need to create a class instance or class attribute, not a class instance, class attribute. So if I write a university of the students, so here I'll create a variable university, and that university is, let's say, Pune. So this is my class attribute which we can access through the class. This is my class attribute. Sorry, this is my class attributes, so that we can access through the class name. So now instead of this student dot name, I just replace student dot university. You can find that variable easily accessible and there is no error over here. So I just save the code and I compile it. I'll get an output. University of the student is Pune. So that is the difference between instance attribute and a class attribute. Instance attribute is hold the data for one object. It cannot be accessed more than one object. So it is very clear that the instance attribute cannot be accessed through the class name. We require a class name to access the class attribute and class object to access the instance attribute. The instance attribute can be only used in only one object and cannot be used in a whole class. And class attribute can be used anywhere throughout the program. So now next part is to write the data member inside a class. So we will use a different way to write a data member and data function inside a class. So data members with no parameter, with parameter, and with return value. So now we will discuss three type of data member which we can write inside a class. The data member with no parameter, with certain parameters, and data member with return a certain value. So one by one we'll write a data member inside a class, so that will perform a certain task. So first of all, we'll write a function which will perform a certain task. So I write a function, let's say define. I want to know about to check the student class, to check the class of the student, in which class he is in. So to check the class of the student. So here I write only a print statement, and within that print I just format the text. I just print self dot, I want to print name of the student. Is studying in third year. Likewise, we can write a print statement inside the function. So this is the function without any kind of a parameter. Self is a parameter to initiate that the function belongs to the class student. So this is not a parameter. So when you call this function, no need to pass any parameter to this function. Now I call the function by using the function name. So whenever I access any kind of a data outside the class, I require a class object. So S1 is my class object that I already created. S1 dot name of the function. To check the class, I am not going to pass any parameter and just save my code. Now what will happen? Whatever the name is been initialized for that student, that data has been printed. So I just save the code and I compile it. I'll get the output. Gokul is studying in a third year. So automatically the function is get called when I call the function through the class object. So S1 dot to check the class, and it goes to cursor to this point. It will execute it. Already S1 contain this kind of a data, Gokul Pune 34 College of Engineering Computer. Out of that, I'll retrieve the name of the students and I'll print it in the console. So in this way, we can write a function without any kind of a parameter. Now we'll write another function which contain the parameter. So I need to write another function which will take a certain parameter to the function. Now next I write a function with a parameter. So I just want to check the surname of the student. So I write a function to check surname of the students, and self is a parameter because the function is within the class, and I want to pass the parameter, let's say surname of the student. I want to pass the surname of the student. So, and after the function there is a colon. So I want to print a statement that will print the surname of the student. So I just use the variable that I want to print is the surname of student, or is the last name of the student. This is the message that I want to print. So this is the message that I want to print after the execution of function. So now I call the function. So function can be called by using class object. So S1 is a class object, and to check the surname is the function. I want to pass the parameter. So parameter is a surname. So I just pass the parameter. Let's say Patil. I just save the code. I just save the code and compile it. I'll get output. Patil is the last name of the student. So in this way, we can pass the parameter to the function. So n number of parameter we can pass to the function, but function can return only one value. Now next data member function, I write inside a function which will return the value. So let's say I want to check the PRN number of the students. So I write a function to check the PRN number of the students. So that number will read from the user, and the same number will be written from the function. So let's say PRN number that I want to return from the function. So here I use a return statement. So return, and what I want to return, the PRN number. So just write a simple function which will return a PRN number. We can write n number of, there is a certain error, just I want to, okay, there is an indentation issue over here. I just use a space. Now it is correctly indented and will not be showing any kind of error. So this function will return a value once it executes. So now I have to call the function. So how to call that function? I just need to use the class object dot method name to check the PRN of the student. So check the PRN. And what is, let's say, PRN number? Let's say certain value inside the variable. So this is my PRN number that I want to print. But there is no print statement in a function. It will return that value. So I'll store that value somewhere. So I just store the value, let's say PRN number is equal to. So that value will be holding a PRN number, and we are going to print that PRN number. PRN underscore number. So in this way, we can use this function. First of all, I need to write a function which will return a certain task. Then we call the function by using class object, but the function won't contain any print statement. So it will just return a value that we will hold in a variable, and that variable we are going to print. Now we will execute this code. Once I compile it, I'll get an error. Sorry, I'll get an answer 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So this PRN number easily I can print. So I just make the comment to these two lines to understand whether our function is executed correctly or not. I just save it and again I compile it. Now you can see, first I print the name of the student, age of the student, then I print the university, and now I print the PRN number of the students. So now it is working. So these three data member I use inside a class which contain different things. The first data member function which don't have any parameter. How to call that function? By using class object and a function name. Then function with a parameter. When we call the function, that time we have to pass the parameter inside a function. And third function, data member, data function which contain the parameter as good as it return a value. So it performs certain task and then return a value. Function can contain n parameter but return only one value. So whatever the value written by the function, we'll store that value in a PRN number and that value we are going to print. So this is about the data member and data function which we use in a. I hope you like the content or I save your time. Please support the video by sharing with your friends. If you not subscribe my channel yet, then please do subscribe and press the notification bell icon to get the latest information. Thanks for watching this video.